We are getting primarily, I would say, parents. A lot of good volunteers in schools are the non-certified sub. We get some people who've retired as aides. We get some people who are community people that are just interested in schools. Some who come in and decide they want to go to school to become a teacher. We have a variety of people in that non-certified group.
Let me just say that if these people have not had a raise, let's not say have not had a raise. If we have not increased substitute pay for at least 10 years, I would like to ask that the superintendent.
We have done that every year. Whatever the individual employees have gotten, they've gotten. That used to not be the case, but Dr. Royster and I have made sure that if we get a 4% raise, those rates go up 4%. If we get a 3%, they go up 3%.
If I ask you then, what is the hourly rate? Help me with that for $87 a day.
I have to divide that by 7.5.
Somebody can divide that by 7.5. I'm wondering if Chick-fil-A at $15 an hour.
Chick-fil-A is paying a lot more than that and more than some of our hourly positions.
So, I feel like it's, I don't know how to say who would make a recommendation or an assessment, but I would ask the administration to look at perhaps what.
$11.60 an hour.
It's our intent as we go into the budget process to look at the pay for all classified hourly employees. That would include the sub rate. It's an issue across all classifications, and it is, every time the economy is good, it's an issue, and every time the economy turns down, it's not an issue. And in a time of a thriving economy, our local economy is even more positive than the national economy. So it is very difficult for us to recruit employees to really anywhere from $12 to $17, $18 an hour positions. And then, we have to look at that. What's the local market? We also have to look at how does that compare with what we pay a starting teacher. So there are a lot of things there, but it's our intent to look at salary as a whole.
Okay. And I think that
as we go into the budget process.
I will say our certified sub rate also goes to your certification rate in a long-term assignment. We are more competitive on certified subs than surrounding districts. So we get a lot of teachers who retire in Pickens or Anderson, Spartanburg, who come and work for us as certified subs because of our structure for pay.
We also use that as a recruitment tool. If we have December graduates and don't have positions for them, we encourage them to become substitute teachers in our district, get their foot in the door. And start in that realm when we can.
Well, I would just appreciate, Dr. Royster, you're looking at it because I know that it was 125, then went down to 100, then back up to 125. But I don't know what happened.
I can go look.
With the non-certified.
It went down. I don't remember if we had to reduce it or if it was significantly lower. I don't really remember, but we can find out.
Okay. That just seems like, to me, it's the same concept of pace and gait. If we're trying to get people interested in being helpful and supportive in our teaching staff overall, we should also recognize that there are professionals out there who have the time for whatever reason or have retired but do not have teaching certificates who could provide a lot of value as subs if there was just a decent day's wage in that. And this is just seems especially low. So thank you for that. Let me see. Are we reducing by 5% somehow the salaries for retirees?
If you are a working retiree, then you're paid 5% less of the salary schedule.
Is that something we've done?
We did that starting probably at that same time.
We've done that since
09,
10, 95%. There was an original plan to step down over time to about 80 some odd percent, which would have stepped them down to kind of entry-level wage for certain jobs. So that's been an effect for working retirees. Now, these are people that are already drawing a full retirement and continuing to work. I think the last time we looked at that, the differential to eliminate that was $3 million, maybe, something like that. We looked at that, I believe, this past budget year. We were asked that question, so somewhere in that budget information, and we can send it to you, was the estimated cost to eliminate that.
Do you think that relates to, would that help us in retaining those veteran teachers longer if?
What would help us is if the state would remove the cap. Because you're talking about a group of people now that over time, they're going to go away. Because, they retire out. That number has dropped from maybe 700 employees a few years ago to it's down now to, I don't know, maybe 300. Don't hold me to the numbers, but kind of a proportional drop like that. What's killing us now is this $10,000 cap. And it's going to hurt us even worse than all the things that have already been mentioned about substitutes. Our best substitutes come from the pool of recently retired teachers. They retire now unless they go to a school with identified as a school with needs, high needs, or a subject matter. Now, it wouldn't apply to math or science, but an ordinary substitute at an ordinary school is going to be capped at $10,000. And with what we pay, they'll run out of cap about the middle of the year. Well, the issue last year, because it was split, that cap was split over 2 calendar years, because the first half of the school year was one part of the calendar year. Second half was the first half of the next calendar year. Well, that group of people is now in the second half of that calendar year. So it is hurting us from a standpoint of one of our best pools of substitutes. Now, the way they've worked around that is to try to maneuver those people into sub-jobs in those schools or in those subject areas. But it still further restricts and hampers our ability to recruit. And quite honestly, that would be helpful in almost all of those job areas where we're short. When you talk about even our jobs with a lesser wage job, lower wage jobs, all those jobs pay way more than $10,000 a year. So if we could attract some retired people because the cap didn't apply to them, that would help us resolve some of the shortages there, we think.
And we talked about that with bus drivers too, how nice it would be that you could have retirees driving buses if they didn't have that $10,000 cap. And hopefully, again, we would just be able to consider if that 5% deduction from retirees matters to our retention. I would certainly like to hear about that in the future. Last point, Mr. Meek, thank you, is do you track what you do? There were 100 and some per year investigations that you all do. Do you track and categorize what those are for?
We do. We track by school, by event, kind of investigation.
I will follow up with a request asking you for that breakdown, not just for this year, but say last 5 years, just to see what the categories look like. That would be very helpful.
So I would just say one thing is some of our investigations are allegations. And so we're going to put someone on leave if someone alleges that they pushed them or whatever. That may not be founded, but those would show up as returning to work. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sutter.
Let me follow up, Ms. Gibbs, on these subs. We've got 836 subs that you listed.
That's how many we hired last year. We have right at 2,000 substitutes in the system right
What
now.
do we hire subs for? Do we have subs for administrators?
We do have a few subs for administrators, like retired principals who work if someone's going to be out more than a week. Somebody, AP's out on leave for surgery, have a baby. But most of those, the subs we hire are for teachers or aides.
Roster, when will we have a sub for administrator?
When do we have them? Basically, long-term absences. In other words, something in excess of 5 days. We have,
To be certified?
yes, sir.
About, for guidance?
We have some guidance subs, if they're going to be out long-term, if they're going to be out a day, we probably don't get a sub for a daily absence of a guidance counselor because they don't have a classroom of kids to cover.
The only place where we're generally going to get a sub for any day a person's out, and that's if we can successfully locate one, would be for a person delivering direct services to a student. Classroom teacher, I think most principals will try to get one. If there's an aide in a classroom, they'll try to get one, but they can't always get one for a single day absence. But they always will for a teacher, or somebody else will have to cover the class.
We have subs for custodians?
We have had in the past, but with the economy the way it is right now, we are having trouble filling our permanent jobs. Now, custodial work, unlike some other areas, we can sometimes overcome that absence with authorizing overtime for the existing staff, which is really not something you can do in most of the other areas because it's not applicable there.
About aides?
We do have some sub-aides, and when an aide is absent, we try to make sure that we have the aide in there. Now, sometimes, because of the particular relationship between an aide and a student, especially those that are assigned special needs, bringing a sub in there might not be the best for that student, so they may choose not to bring one in there if it's a single day or 2 day absence.
They have to have any qualifications in aid?
Well, an aide has to pass the WIN test or have a certain number of college hours to be highly qualified. That's a federal requirement.
Is that for self-contained students or is that for all students?
All aides, right? So it could be for kindergarten aides or special ed aides. And we do some training with subs on if they're going to be in special ed classrooms.
So there is no difference between a substitute aide for a self-contained class and for a regular
Right.
class? Most of our aides are elementary, right?
Right, most. There's few in high schools and middle schools in the special ed classes.
Okay. When we have certified, a long-term sub, what do we pay? We start off, if I understand correctly, if you're certified, you get $125 a day.
So on
If I'm a long-term sub, is there a point in time when that will change?
at day 11, then you would move to your certificate rate based on your years and your degree on your certificate.
Do we have any teacher subs that are not certified?
No, sir. I mean, we might have to cover a classroom with a non-certified teacher. You cannot do that for long-term without us having an accreditation issue.
Are we getting a lot of retiree teachers that are coming back? Explain to me again, Ms. Gibb, the 5% less. That's by the district or the state or
The
what?
district. So we don't reduce the daily sub rate by 5%. If they go into a long-term assignment, we do reduce that 5% because they would be paid like their neighbor across the street in a classroom that was also a working retiree.
Dr. Oyster, why would we pay them 5% less?
I'm sorry, Ms. South, could you repeat that?
Why would we pay a retiree teacher certificate 5% less?
We undertook that action after the recession in 2009. As we viewed that, number one, it's a benefit that most people never believed they would have, to be able to draw their full retirement and then return to work with no restrictions on it. So they came back and could have been eligible to earn 100% of what they were making the year before. Almost every district in the state did something similar to what we did, and I believe we are one of the ones that has the lowest reduction. Some of them went all the way down to 70% of salary. We never went below 95%. And actually, with the increases they've gotten in the intervening years, if they've been retired more than 2 years, they're making more money than they were when they retired, because they get the increase every year, minus 5% reduction.
Well, I've spoken to, they just can't understand why they retire, but now if they want to go back and work, then they've got to be for 5% less. And I can't explain that to them.
It was a way for us to give them the benefit of returning to work at a higher wage than they would have ever imagined they could have earned when they started in the system, and a way for the district to reduce its cost. And we did that back in the day when we were making choices between doing that or laying people off.
We're going to continue with the 5% less, or we're looking at making a change in that.
We have continued that since that time.
2009,
Since 2009, yes, sir, we've done that every year. We have not changed it. We've looked at that in the budget each year. Several years ago, I think it was $3 to $4 million. It's probably less than that now. It's still, I guess that depends on how you approach that philosophically. It's still a pretty good benefit that you can draw your full retirement and come back to work and make 95% of what you were making. Not something most people ever thought they'd be able to do.
why we're giving them 5% less.
That's why.
I am correct, Ms. Gibbs, if I am certified, then I'm getting the 125, but on day 11, then I get what a regular, normal teacher gets.
Unless you're retired, and it would be 5% less.
Okay, so
Right.
if I'm retired, then they're going to take 5% less.
Right.
But if I'm not retired and I'm sub, then I'm full pay. That doesn't sound right to me.
Wouldn't be a sub if you were.
Won't think about that. Thank you, I'm through.
Thank you, Mr. Suddeth. Ms. LaVistas Wells.
Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, ma'am.
On this retirement situation, if you tarry, that retirement goes into effect. But if you did not tarry, you're going to be penalized? Because I don't think that's correct.
So, yes, ma'am, you're still a retiree if you didn't tarry. Now you have to have a 30-day break. So people could have retired at the end of last school year. They had to have a break over the summer. They didn't tarry. We're having our first people like that. They have to now have a 30-day break. They came back for this school year. We would have put in, they're still drawing their retirement. We would have put a 5% reduction because they're a working retiree.
Actually, if you were in Terry, there was no reduction. You made 100% of your salary while you were in
While
Terry.
you were tarrying, but after your 5 years ended,
Whenever the 5 years ended, or you chose to come out of Terry, or if you went in it in its last 5 years of existence, you could have been in it less than 5 years and maxed out how much you could be in it. Once you came out from under Terry, then we continued to employ people as a working retiree at 95% of their wage. And they're getting 100% of their retirement, whatever their retirement benefit was. So if,
unless what?
yes, and now there's the cap, and they can't make but $10,000 unless they come in and out of the retirement system, which you can do.
You can come in and out.
You can come in and out. Once you've earned $10,000,
Retirement
you
stop.
stop your retirement. You draw your regular pay for the rest of the year, and at the beginning of the next year, you can do the same thing again.
Is that an age bracket, though? If you're 62, are you exempt from that?
No.
That applies if you're retired, no matter what year's experience or age you might have been. There's some.
Got some 50.
I'm not sure, because why would that state retirement system be different for other state, like Greenville Tech? Because you could have tarried with Tech, but then you can, I never tarried, but I'm going to give you an example. If you were going to retire at 62, then you could come back and work. yes, you're going to get state retirement, but you could come back and work and not be penalized.
The cap doesn't apply at age 62.
The cap does not apply to
you-
age 62.
Now, you can't go out and then come back when you turn 62.
No, right.
If you retire, you're correct about that. If you retire and you have already attained age 62, the $10,000 earnings cap does not apply to
The
you.
reason I'm asking is I have people that are working at Tech that they're 62, and I said, oh, so you can only cap out at 10, and they went, no.
They retired, how old they were, and how many years they
Young
had.
retirements are penalized.
Yes.
Yes, January 1st,
The younger you are, you retire, you're penalized. That's correct.
I've got maybe 2
There's some
minutes.
other qualifiers around that as well.
Without objection, we'll extend for another 15 minutes.
Sorry. All right, well, that's kind of interesting. And yes, I do understand because law enforcement's in that same bracket. If they retire early, then they have to go out of law enforcement into a totally different private sector or whatever. I don't even think they can be teachers. All right, with that being said, PACE and those people that are working towards their degrees, are they getting paid what teachers make?
Yes.
Even though they're not certified, but they do get paid the 40,000?
They get a certificate, a critical needs certificate with a degree level and years of service. So they do get and are paid just like a teacher would be on the teacher's
Good,
pay
I
scale.
like that.
Yes.
That's
yes.
great. All right, and then another great point that came out of this that I'm glad I was here to hear. There is a retiring teacher certificate, which means what?
Means they get to keep these, they don't have to continue with their professional development. and
Effective when?
renewing. Effective last year, I believe. Yeah.
Michelle, we don't have to take those classes, so I need to get my certificate
If you'll
recertified.
stop over in the HR room, I'll get you signed up.
Now, Margaret, did they,
That is the best news I've heard. I've been sitting
did,
You need to go to Anderson District.
One time, right.
did
5
they,
years and can be renewed one time.
did
That's
they
all I need.
clear up the issue around whether or not that was subject specific?
It's not.
No, they have not. They do not have
I don't want you to make a mistake.
correct. Well, you would get that retiree certificate would allow you to work and receive certified sub pay, so the
Okay.
125. It does not list a certificate, area of,
This is
subject.
only for subbing.
This is only for
So
subbing.
for a
Not
long-term
going back into
sub,
the-
you would not qualify for
cap
daily
probably
rate.
was only
You would
one
not
of-
qualify for daily rate because you don't have a subject area on that certificate.
So
However,
If we don't have math subs and we know you taught math, then we would have to be reviewing those individually.
but that would be a decision that we
district
could make
decision.
locally.
This is so
But the
interesting.
districts all over the state are not required to do that. It would become their choice
Correct.
to do that because that's not a subject-specific certificate.
correct.
Now, I understood they were trying to,
Remedy that. I have not
Correct
heard
that.
anything
Well,
yet.
let me try and get recertified before they correct it.
For that was that these people going out that we needed to sub were saying, I'm not going to do this, read to succeed. And so this was a way to have those people extend the life of their certificate.
Right, and I think then when y'all contacted me, I had to take that course before I could take the other courses. So, well, good. Well, thank you. I told you it'd be 2 minutes. That's it. Thank you.
That was not true.
What?
It was not true, but it was a good conversation.
2 minutes? I timed it.
Ms. Wales?
11:22.
Ms. Wales?
Thank you. Man, there's so much good stuff. My head's going to explode. So I think the thing about the retirement is we have an unsustainable model. So when you ask, why do we reduce pay to 95%? It's because we have a model for retirement that we can't maintain. So whoever got us in this mess, I don't know, before my time, but I think that's why we're where we are. And I think, you may not like it, it may be distasteful, but I think I wouldn't be in favor of changing it. Unless we don't think about going down, if you're saying a lot of the other districts are going down to 70, but But I think that what that makes me think about, so one thing for bus drivers, it's good to hear that they can opt out, because the problem now, if you come into the retirement system, is, they have this rule of 90 for you to actually get your full benefits. So, for me, when I worked at the city, there's no way I was going to get there, till I'd be 80. So I think that's a big benefit. Similarly, it makes me think that we really should rethink perhaps the value of these subs who have degrees that aren't certified teachers. I might have ended up going into teaching when my kids were little and I did PTA and SIC and I was helping a lot in the classroom. I thought about doing sub work. And when I realized that I was not going to get paid any more than that amount, knowing that I had bachelor's and master's degree, had practiced engineering, was a professional engineer, and I was going to get paid that much a day, I just said, not doing it. I can go do something somewhere else. So, and I have friends who did sub, and then they eventually, when their kids got a little older, they went back and got their certificate, and they stayed in the classroom. Again, I thought about it and just felt like you can't do it. So I think we should really rethink whether we should pay professional people who have college degrees that much less than certified teachers for sub work.
I do too.
Just like we've seen a lot of success in the GATE program and PACE program, where people have worked in other professions and they've translated that now into a teaching profession. And we've got some phenomenal ones. I think about Scott O'Neill at Fisher, who's just an incredible teacher, science teacher who's an engineer and came back into the education world. So I really would like for us to pay close attention to that and see if there's just rethink that a little bit. On the PACE program, not providing enough, maybe they don't have the support. It's online, maybe they don't have the support. And this is something I heard from my friend Scott O'Neill years ago. And I remember we toured Fisher, and Molly Spearman was touring with us, and she asked some questions, and she and I had a brief conversation about PACE and what they needed to do to improve it. So my question is, are we giving feedback actively as we're seeing the successes we have in GATE? Are we giving very specific active feedback to the State Department, specifically to Molly Spearman, about how they need to improve PACE to make that a more effective program for teachers across the state?
Yes, and more importantly, we've directed our folks to see what we need to do to expand GATE where we can replace it.
Right, so I think, so the answer to that is yes. Those are conversations that we have routinely in our personnel roundtable sessions and things like that. And I also know Molly, so we have, yes, I would say, other types of conversations when we have the opportunity to do that. So they are very well aware of what is successful and what is not successful. What I think they see happening now is obviously with the teacher shortage in traditional programs, there is an increase in these alternatives, which without additional personnel at the State Department of Education, what they can do for them is limited and getting more limited because there are more people and less people to provide that support. And so I think they are looking to the districts, and us being one of those, setting the example of what can we then do for the teachers here to help retain them. They'll still put them through their programs, through the PACE program, but then what can a district do to provide additional support so that we retain them? I think we can recruit them, but then retaining them. And I think Greenville is doing an excellent job and a lot of forward thinking on that to make sure we provide them with the hands-on support that they need.
Yeah, because it doesn't really do any good to have it really accessible and have a bunch of people doing an online PACE program if they're not going to stick with it and if they can't be successful. So it's kind of a waste. You'd be better off to limit the number of people you allow into PACE and provide more, like we've done, basically.
Yeah, yes,
very specific in the numbers.
So Stacy Forrester in my office she visits with them each year to have conversations, in particular the new hires, just to find out what's happening. I would say that her feedback this year, she and I had a conversation last week, her feedback from the folks that we have hired in the PACE program is that there have been some programmatic changes, and they felt better prepared than some of the folks she has talked to in the past that we have hired. So that was some feedback for us. I do think they're trying harder to improve the programs. What we have learned is that the training is very generic for the state of South Carolina. So what they get is a basic one-size-fits-all kind of a training, whereas our GATE program is definitely more specific to what we need for them to do as teachers here in Greenville. So we need to continue to provide that support. And again, the new person we hired will develop those programs with Karen Cap and keep us going forward with that.
Okay. So when we think about recruiting, how do we go about recruiting or paying attention to people who are completing their degrees through these online universities and those kinds of things? Because
Being teaching degrees online. Those programs also have to provide student teaching. So we're in contact with them because those programs in the state of South Carolina still require them to student teach, correct, Margaret? So
That's
we
correct,
have all
yes.
those online universities contacting Margaret's group who handles student teaching. So we are,
I don't know that we hire those in abundance, but they do have to do a student teaching model. That's something that South Carolina does not waive. The only way you can have that waived is if somehow you were hired, and GATE would be an example of that, as is PACE. They don't do a student teaching, but if you're in that position for 2 years, then you can waive the university requirement. But if you're in an online university program, you cannot waive the student teaching. So we do have folks that contact us that are intending to work in the Greenville area to do
but
their
we're not
student
recruiting
teaching.
those people because
Well, I don't know, yeah, well.
I don't know that we
I don't know
do
that we
any
specifically-
special advertising other than what we would have out there about they certainly could come to Shining Stars, they could come to our other events.
If we're in those areas where those colleges and universities are located or where the person lives and they are on any kind of, if they're on any kind of a board or a career center for a college or university, they would know about any event that is in their area. Are we specifically contacting those online programs? And you're talking traditional, right? Traditional.
yeah, well, I
online.
mean, because we're talking about we travel out of state, and what I know is we have, and you mentioned like if there's 7 graduates out of the math program, we're all trying to get those 7 graduates.
Right.
Well, that's just from our state,
Oh,
our
yeah, yes,
state
so-
universities. So
yes.
there are all these people that, I don't know all these people, but I know folks who are doing the online, they're working and they're doing an online university program.
Right.
And that's a group of people, a pool of candidates that it
Right.
sounds like we're not really paying attention to. Hopefully they're paying attention to us, but we're not
Well,
really, we're
if
not
the-
recruiting them.
Yeah, if they're associated with a university, then technically we're recruiting them in the same way, if we are going to that particular university.
I know,
But
I
they're
mean,
doing the
online.
program.
We're talking about a school that
Talking about-
only does online
Talking about online
programs.
programs.
Quality varies, doesn't it?
I will add that to my look at list, so no,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if we're we're saying that we're willing to take people who don't have any teaching credential whatsoever. And I don't know what the answer is. I just know of one in particular, special ed, someone who wants to get a degree in special ed, and her only option was for her to do an online, and she did online university versus something else. She thought that was her only option, so.
Do you know what university she did? No, okay, that would be, but I will look at that.
And I would say, if
certainly
you
are not
hear of those
excluded
people,
in any way.
if you hear of those people, if you'll have them
Yeah.
contact Margaret, she will certainly get a recruiter in touch with them early as they're going through that program. One of
So
the
they know how-
cautions about those online programs is to make sure they're recognized under the South Carolina Department of Ed.
Right.
Because we have had some issues with our own employees getting graduate degrees from online programs that were not recognized by the South Carolina Department of Ed, and they have spent a lot of time and effort to find out the South Carolina Department of Ed wasn't going to recognize their admin degree because it wasn't a program that they had approved.
So just
So-
as a, for example, I will give you the University of Phoenix. We hire a lot of folks that have a degree from the University of Phoenix, but I imagine the majority of those reside in our area and are in that online program. So they're going to teach in Greenville, and they're getting their online degree through University of Phoenix because we hire a fair number of folks with that online degree in particular.
Okay, so in this report, I guess the thing that, from a data standpoint, I like seeing the diversity numbers, and that's great to see we're edging up. With retention, so this was recruitment and retention, but I didn't see any turnover.
How many more minutes you need?
I need well, this is data I'm going to ask for, so like 2 minutes. I'll watch my 2
Does
minutes.
anyone else want to say anything else?
You have follow-up question?
Okay.
Okay, we're going to extend for 15 minutes.
Okay. I didn't see turnover data, like retention, just a table of how many teachers, elementary school teachers did we lose, percentage-wise? How many career technology teachers did we lose? How many bus drivers? Just as a percentage of what our numbers are. Do we have that data somewhere?
We have that,
We're glad to get that.
we'll get that for you. We have it. We have it by year. I can give you.
Okay, because in particular, I was interested in the Kate, because the other thing I've heard from folks who come in to teach Kate after they've been in industry is we put them through a lot of hoops to make them teach the way we teach everything else, even though Kate isn't like everything else. It's a little different. So just really interested in knowing what is the stability of those teachers and those fields, what does that look like, to see if there's something we need to do. We talked about,
Well, I do think
we
one of
bumped
the
salaries
things
a little
you
bit.
did for Kate was
Right.
approve those years, which has helped our turnover in those Kate programs to recognize their total years on their
Yeah,
pay.
so I think that's helped. I've gotten feedback that was appreciated.
Well, we can give
So-
you
As a
some turnover
reminder, the
numbers.
hoops they have to jump through are hoops established by the state.
Well, that's right, but it's no those things, do we need to be advocating that
Certainly.
some things need to be handled a little bit differently?
And again, that group is also grouped in with the other alternatives that we have already put an emphasis on and will continue to provide additional support. And Eric and I met yesterday just to talk about some things with their contract that maybe we would want to consider, not putting them through formal evaluation during their second year, but we do have to consider their state requirements and how quickly that they have to finish. But there are some conversations about how to help them in the first part, so that they can concentrate on getting better before they have to go through a formal state evaluation. So there are
Well,
conversations
and I'd say
there.
getting better is even relative, because it's getting better at doing what we want them to do, the way,
It's-
to teach
how
the way
about-
we want them to teach versus,
Yeah, how about getting
The
to
skills.
the point where they will be successful the first time going through an evaluation?
there you go, that's much, yeah, that's more, yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, if I can get the turnover data, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Connor.
Yes, I just would like to echo the fact that it sounds wonderful, Dr. Royster, to look at that distinction, because I was trying to say, how do we compare the subs to what we're doing for Kate and Gate? And Lisa said it very well, which is, we're not saying that if you're a high school graduate, which is what you have to be to be a sub, is the same thing as somebody who is a college graduate who has professional experience that we would like to attract into the classroom for being subs. Then we might look at that salary increase accordingly. So I like that idea, just wanted to say so. Thanks.
We've noted that.
Thank you.
Mr. Summers.
Dr. Oyster, an opinion, but you do know a lot of stuff. This is how I want your
You want a short opinion too, right?
The problem with the South Carolina retirement system, do you think that was due to the Terry program?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, that was Ms. Levinas Wells' opinion. No, I don't think it was due to the Terry program as it was concluded. Now, I think the beginning of the Terry program, yes, because they took what used to be 30 years to retire and said, oh, you can go at 28. And you can come back, draw your retirement, and be paid. So, in effect, you incentivize people to retire 2 years early. Had they taken the same concept and said, well, if you'll stay to 35 instead of 30, then we'll let you do this, it would have had a positive effect. But what they did do, I don't know, 3-4 years into it, they made people in the program and working retirees contribute to the retirement system, the same percentage that those of us who haven't retired have to contribute, and they don't get any benefit from that. So I think that helped fix what they did initially that was detrimental. The two things that have been most detrimental to the retirement system have been the choices they've made on investments, which have been out of sync with what other state retirement funds have done, and the amount that they have paid to consultants to advise the retirement system on the appropriate investments, whose fee structure far exceeds the fee structures of other state retirement systems, what they pay similar people. Those are the two big issues. And people are living longer.
Down, that was good.
Have you ever thought about a sub for a school board trustee?
What would the daily rate be? What would the daily rate be?
If somebody wants to take a vacation.
5 cents.
Less 9%.
Thank you, Mr. Big.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? I have a couple. I heard you mention earlier about all the places you advertise and all that, Ms. Gibbs. Do we ever advertise on the school marquees?
We do for our job fairs.
I've
Yes.
seen those, but
We send that, as a matter of fact, I sent one last night. November, we asked them to put it on their marquees, and we asked them to put it in their phone message.
that would be it.
Yeah, that is really one of the most successful things we have happen, is for them to put it on their marquee and to send it in their message.
Well, everyone has, that drives their kids back and forth to school, sits in those lines and reads that message over and over again, whatever it is. Also, what were the number of states that you called off earlier that we recruit in, that you recruit in?
Number.
What states do you
Okay,
recruit
hold
in?
on, I wrote them down on here because I was afraid I wouldn't remember. North Carolina, these were last year, Alabama, Missouri, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Florida, New York, Michigan, and that's it.
Don't do Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia.
Last year, yeah. So we have had some that we've done in the past that we've stopped going to because we didn't get, they either weren't producing a number of education graduates or we had not been successful in getting people to come from those states. But Margaret's always looking at that and looking at what should we change up, where should we try something new?
I know, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and I know that they,
Trying to remember the name of the university, but it was, northern Kentucky, southern Ohio.
oh, no.
There is a place right there, but they also have to have teacher education programs. They need to have an abundance of graduates, that make it worth the money that it takes to go there. And then we need to have a return on investment. When we do go, we're bringing home candidates. So there's a lot of things that go into thinking about it rather than just the state. It is a nationally recognized teacher education program where the quality of the graduate is what we would want to attract back to Greenville. So there's lots to think about in terms of where we go and why we go there.
On the WIN test, what subjects are you tested on?
I'll probably have to give you the technical, there's three categories. There's a math score, there's one associated with reading and one with locating information, but I'll have to send you the three categories that we use under the WIN scores.
So do our bus drivers,
Bus drivers do not have to do WIN.
drivers do not?
They have to pass the CDL, those requirements. The people who have to take WIN are food service folks, building service folks, and aides, unless they have a 2-year degree or a number of credit hours, and school secretary bookkeepers.
What the WIN, the pass-fail rate is on the test?
I do not, because we don't see all the test results. I can maybe see if Lifelong Learning could share some of that with us.
Do they have any programs to,
One of the big enhancements that we have against other industry that requires the WIN test is we have remedial tutoring sessions for people to get the WIN test. Now, you can go take the WIN test without that, but if you don't pass one part, they still will offer for you to come back free with them and increase your score on that one section, and you can take that again.
one of the biggest concern I've heard from constituents on is the math part of it. That they said, hey, we haven't had math for.
Right, and I think when I'm at a job fair, we always say to people, before you go take that WIN test, there's some practice sessions. They tell them how to go online, try to do a little math, read the newspaper to try to get your, and our level is the bronze level at those entry-level jobs, which I think relates to about a 4th, 5th grade math.
How important is it for our employees if they're going to be in the cafeteria to pass this one test?
Well, measurement has become a big part of food service because that they're now cooking, reading instructions, following safety situations. So prior to having those requirements, we didn't have a very good way to screen out people who didn't have good reading and math skills. We had some accidents where people mixed chemicals incorrectly. We had a lot of difficulty communicating with employees in appropriate language. So I believe, and we have polled our people, even in difficult times, that those of us who have been here before and after that still believe it's of value to have that screening tool to help us get the best employees.
Could you just give me the statistics on the pass-fail?
Yeah, I will see if that's something we can get from Lifelong Learning. Now, some people don't take it at Lifelong Learning, but we should be able to get it from them.
All of our 11th graders take it.
Question I had on certified, non-certified teachers. Do they receive any benefits?
Subs.
Subs.
Well, I used to could say no, but if you come back to work after you've been employed by us, there are certain circumstances under the Affordable Care Act where you might be eligible for some benefits for a certain period of time. But it's very complex. I refer all those people to benefits. But if you leave active employment and you don't have a 6-month break in service, you could be eligible for benefits for at least 18 months. But as a general rule, no, sir.
That's all my questions. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none.
They might want to consider adding a handwriting component, especially
Cursive, yeah.
Cursive writing.
Thank you. Ms. Sylvanus Wells, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Our next session, Erica, I don't want you to get a complex. I really don't. I know we postponed you last month, but we are going to take a lunch break. We will resume at 12:20. Eric, I'm sorry. Is that all right? Okay, you get to eat. You get to eat.
We don't want you
So-
sitting on an empty stomach.
We will resume at 12:20. Thank you so much. I will turn the program over to Ms. Goodwin Caldwell, chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I'm in charge of instruction. Let's look at 3.01, career and technical education, building hard and soft skills. Presenter is Mr. Eric Williams. Dr. Royster, do you have anything to say before we turn it over to him?
Simply, this presentation is a result of requests from Ms. Sylvanus Wells and Mr. Shamley regarding our specific efforts in the area of career and technical education.
Yeah.
And Mr. Williams is going to present some information around that topic and answer questions that you might have regarding, most specifically, developing hard and soft skills among our students aligned with the career and technical fields. Mr. Williams?
Afternoon. I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you for a few minutes about what we're doing. We sort of have a mantra that we're doing big things in career and technical education in Greenville County schools, but what we're also realizing is that those big things require very intentional and methodical planning as we put those pieces in place. And so we're working towards designing some systems and processes that will help us get to those big things. And so what I'd like to do today is talk with you both about where we've been, share with you some of our data from last year in terms of career and technical education growth. And I will say that growth took place under Ms. Dean as the interim executive director of CTE. So I can't take credit for any of it, but they did some great things last year. And so we want to continue to move that forward as we look to grow our programs. One of the common misconceptions is that CTE is just at our career centers, and that's not the truth. We have career and technical education programming. In the elementary school, we really tried for exploration to just give them opportunities to explore what might be out there, the different career fields. Our school counselors work closely with them. We even had several of our fifth grade classes did a day where they visited the Career Center and then they went to CMI in the afternoon and visited out there just to kind of play with the machinery and see the different programs, simply exploration. We do have middle school programming, and you can see those things listed there. Some of those are for high school credit, but others, again, are just sort of exploration programs. And then we get into our high school and our Career Center programs. That's where the extensive amount of the majority of our work is done in CTE. You can see the variety of programs that we offer in both places. We've seen tremendous growth in career and technical education enrollment. If you remember back to 2014-15 and 15-16, that was when Mr. Smith made the decision to take our health science programs from our career centers, from our high schools, or from our career centers and move them out to our high schools. And so we've had sort of an upward trajectory since then, and that did two things for us. That allowed us to expose the program to many more students. At a career center, for example, you might have had 15 students in the morning and 15 students in the afternoon. So with that one teacher, 30 students were getting exposure to that teacher. You take that teacher and the program and all the equipment that comes with it and you move it to the high school, you're getting between 125 to 150 students exposure to that program over the course of the year. So whenever possible, we look for opportunities when those programs don't require specialized space to be able to move them out to the high school. That also creates additional space inside of our career centers to add programs. Of course, those things take work to make sure that we're making the right space in there, but that has afforded us some opportunities to add programs at the Career Center as well. The blue is the unduplicated enrollment, so those are individual students. And then, of course, the orange bar there is the number of courses that were offered. And so you can see we've had a slight increase in the individual number of students, but also those students are intentionally staying in CTE programming to go through a completer pathway or program of study. And so we consider that a strong win as well, that we've been able to increase from about 13,000 to 17,000 the number of units that are being offered to our students. Specific to our career centers, again, this is interesting data because we've moved programs away from the career center, but we've still seen significant growth at our career centers. So we're at the point now where many of those programs, not all of them, we're working on those, but many of those programs have reached capacity. And so we're talking now about sort of a competitive admission process and what do we do in that process. And so tremendous success there. And again, I think it's important to point out 1,900, if you go back to the previous slide, of the 9,000 are at the Career Center. So a significant amount, more than 75% of our CTE programming actually takes place at our high schools. A smaller number at our career centers, but those are really our specially designed spaces that have hard caps on their classroom space for safety reasons and for certification reasons. Those classes need to be small in nature. The strategic plan focuses significantly on industry standard certifications, and as a district, we've also focused in as part of our Graduation Plus initiative, and so we've seen tremendous growth in the number of industry certifications over the last 5 years, up to over 2,100 last year, and I anticipate that number, with the certifications being offered, that number to continue to grow as we move into next year. One of the things that we're focusing in on, we're starting to talk about this concept of stackable certifications. And as we talk to industry and business partners, we're hearing more and more from them that they need students with employability skills or professional skills coming to them. In many cases, they want them to have technical skills as well, but in many cases, they are willing to teach them the technical skills, and they really want them to have what we used to call soft skills. We've kind of moved away from that term a little bit, but they want them to have those professional skills. And so in order to meet that need, in response to what we've heard from business and industry, we've implemented a program that's through microburst learning, and that's just the name of the company. That doesn't really mean a whole lot, but it is truly a program where students get certification in those professional or those employability skills. That certification has been vetted and it's recognized by the South Carolina Department of Education for all clusters, so it's not specific to a particular cluster, but it's also recognized by the South Carolina Manufacturing Alliance as a viable certificate that they are encouraging for their employees to have as well. So not only is it being offered in schools, it's being offered in many workplaces around the state of South Carolina as well. So we're currently offering a pilot program. The early results are tremendous. Both our teachers and our students are enjoying the program and really feel like it's adding a lot of value to their curriculum. Many of these skills are already embedded in our CTE courses already. And so really they're not necessarily having to add something to their curriculum. They're able to substitute this information in. So what we'd like to do, it's currently being offered to 1,000 students. What we hope to do is expand that pilot program to offer this in all of our level 1 or first level CTE courses. And then, of course, in the level 2 or the higher level courses, as students matriculate through welding, for example, they would get the industry certification as well, so that when they leave us, they have 2 things that they can carry with them. They have the microburst employability skills certification, and they have X number of welding certificates as well. Again, it's all about that competitive advantage for our students. If we can give them something to take with them, a piece of paper, or a certification that says we have done this, they have a competitive advantage over folks that are entering the workforce in other areas. So we're really pleased with how that's going, and we anticipate that moving forward. We're very thankful for the money that was allocated by this board for certifications last year, and that's where part of that is being used. OSHA also offers a certification, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, called OSHA 10, and it is a very basic level safety certification that's recognized and encouraged in many workplaces around the state of South Carolina. And so we've really increased the number of certifications that we're offering to our students in OSHA as well. And again, it's a base level certification, but when we compare it with an industry standard certification, again, those students have a little bit more of a competitive advantage to take with them. So currently, in most places, we're having OSHA trained instructors come in and talk to our students. There is an online version of OSHA as well, and so we're kind of exploring and toying with different possibilities for how we get our students that certification. So as a capstone, once they are college ready and career ready, the idea is that this generation of students, the Y generation, they're asking questions and they want experiences. And so what we're finding is if we can give them a bona fide work-based learning experience, that will do one of 2 things. That will connect them to a career path, or it will help them realize, you know what, this is not the career path that I want to be on. And both of those things we consider in CTE a win. Those students, whether they decide that's what they want to do or not, they can save a lot of time and, more importantly, a bunch of money if they can make that decision early. So we have a strong partnership with the Greenville Chamber of Commerce, and this has really gained a lot of steam over the last several months. We have a program called Launch Greenville. So essentially, the Chamber provides the businesses, and we provide the students. And then on a day, we bring them together for what we call Interview Day. Prior to that interview, our work-based learning coordinators work with them. They provide them interview prep, resume writing prep. some of the soft skills that they need, how to shake hands with their prospective employee when they meet them, what to do with their cell phone during an interview, those very important skills that those students need to know. And then they come in and they will go through the interview process. And so you can see here, there's a couple of pictures of students. We did it at MT Anderson, February 25th and 26th. We'll do our next round at CMI. And so students will come in